We get to hear from Sonny Dykes and a few select players at Big 12 Media Days this week. First time we've heard from those guys in a while. I'll give you the questions that need to be answered for the TCU Horned Frogs. That's coming up next here on Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Big 12 Media Day is going on right now. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel or on your favorite podcast platform. Starting tomorrow, I'm assuming most of you are listening on Monday, but if you're listening on Tuesday, then starting today, around 11 a.m., TCU will go through the car wash, so to speak, at Big 12 Media Days. It's in Vegas this year. It's been at AT&T Stadium in Arlington for a few seasons now, but moving it to Las Vegas as Brett Yormark tries to kind of make the Big 12 more of a national brand. And so with some of the new partners that are now out west going to Vegas to kind of corner that market. But Sonny Dykes is going to have a press conference. He'll speak with ESPNU. He'll have breakout sessions where he speaks with select reporters. They're also sending a few players. Josh Hoover, which I think is really good news that he's going to be there, given the fact that he missed spring practice due to an injury. Jack Besh, wide receiver. Mike Nichols, offensive lineman. Caleb Fox, defensive lineman. Namdio Bizor, linebacker and leading tackler last year for the Horned Frogs. All those guys are going to be front and center in front of the media starting on Tuesday. And here are the three questions that I think have to be answered by Sonny Dykes and those players, but mainly by Coach Dykes as we get ready for this upcoming TCU football season. The first one, and I think in some ways it's been answered given that he's going to be there in person facing the media, but we need to know about Josh Hoover's health status. We've talked a lot this offseason about how this offense has to take a step forward. The defense last year, there's no question about it. It was atrocious. And they really overhauled that in a big way by letting go Joe Gillespie, by bringing in Andy Avalos. They're going to be more aggressive. They're going to be more multiple on defense. They're going to disguise coverages more. A lot of new and exciting wrinkles coming with the defense. Offensively, they're keeping this scheme pretty much the same. I expect to see a fast tempo at all times like we did last season. I expect to see a lot of the concepts that Kendall Briles wants to bring to the table. The question is going to be, can you be more consistent in the run game, in short yardage situations? Can you be more efficient in the red zone so you're scoring touchdowns and not field goals, and you're not settling, especially for long field goals, which was a huge issue for Griffin Kell last year. I think it'll get better with Kyle Limmerman coming in as a freshman kicker, but still, you want to avoid 50-plus yard attempts if you can. Are they going to play more complementary football? All that centers around the offense being better this year. And I've said all offseason, the O-line is the key cog to that. And I'll get to them a little bit later on in the segment. But another key to this, because a lot of the optimism centering around the offense when the season ended against Oklahoma was predicated around like, okay, Josh Hoover looks to be the clear starter. They went in the transfer portal. They got Ken Seals, Haas Haney coming in as a true freshman. But Josh Hoover appears to be the guy. And he's going to have a full off season where he gets to look over the offense, get a better understanding of it, even though I feel like he's probably got that down pretty pat at this point. Get reps with the receiving core with some new faces. And that'll be all. I mean, that'll improve the offense just by itself. Now, a wrench kind of got thrown in that with him missing spring practice. So where is he at now? Is he at 100% full health? Because I've said this, like with Ken Seals, I like the pickup. I think it makes sense. And I feel like in this new era of the transfer portal, there is now a market for guys like Ken Seals that have experience as a starter at the Power 5 level, in his case in the SEC. They are going to be a good addition to the quarterback room just by their presence, that veteran savvy, that ability to help communicate and break down like, okay, this is what we need to do to the other players in that room. And also, if you have to put him in a game because Josh is hurt or because something comes up, then you still feel like you can function within the offense well, and you're not completely hamstrung or working with a hand tied behind your back because you still have a lot of the offensive concepts available to you. You're not that limited. It's similar to a veteran backup quarterback in the NFL. You sign that guy because they're a good locker room presence, and if push comes to shove and they have to play, there are ways that you can still win football games with them at the helm. And I think that's the role that Ken Seals fits. But I believe Josh Hoover is your guy, so I want to know where he is, what kind of work he's been doing this offseason, where he feels like he's going to improve, what he's working on, and just how comfortable he is with this offense in year 2 or year 1.5 in the system, because he took over from Chandler Morris after Chandler suffered that injury against Iowa State. So I think that's the big thing that's kind of looming over the proceedings, is where is he at health-wise. Number 2, the O-line. I would love to get – I don't know how much depth we'll get from Sonny on this or how detailed he'll be, because I know things can shuffle around, things can change in fall camp. But I would love to get his perspective on the offensive line, where they are, and maybe a few names that he feels confident about. You bring in Bless Harris from Florida State. Cade Bennett's a guy that's going to be coming over from San Diego State and will be plugged in there in fall camp. Carson Bruno, someone who's been working with the team, coming over from Louisiana Tech. Colton Deary returning. Mike Nichols, who will be there in person returning and could possibly be on the other side of Bless Harris at that other tackle spot. Ben Taylor Whitfield got some playing time last year. There are some names of both returners and players in the transfer portal that have emerged through spring camp as possibilities in the 2 deep. How does he feel about the O-line? Does he think physically they're ready to rock and roll? And does he have any idea of who these starters are? Because I think the quicker the better when it comes to building continuity, building identity up front, and solidifying that communication and just that team working together as a unit. Now, one thing about moving on from Texas and Oklahoma in the new Big 12 is, at least in theory, now there's still some really physical teams. Utah comes to mind, Kansas State comes to mind. But by and large, I think they're going to be, equal when it comes to like talent disparity from that standpoint up front. They're not going to face some of the monster defensive lines they have in the past few years. But you still have to be good at the point of attack. And that's going to be a huge factor in running the football with Cam Cook. It's going to be a huge factor in protecting the quarterback and allowing Josh Hoover to make plays to get that vertical passing game going, because that was something last season that was also missing. That's a staple of Bryle's offense, that ability to stretch the field and take the top off the defense and make the defense, think about that vertical passing attack. That wasn't available consistently last season. And so TCU has to improve on that as they move forward into this next year, and the offensive line is going to be a huge part of that. So hopefully that's solidified and they have a good idea of, okay, these are the 5 guys, or, at least 3 or 4 guys. Maybe there's 1 or 2 spots that are open. And he might say, he might just say for competitiveness sake, he might say, well, it's open competition, right? But I remember last year, as fall camp was going, AJ Ricker still had a lot of questions about, okay, where is this guy going to play? He was moving players around. And at the time, it was sort of like, oh, well, it's just open competition, right? But then as the season started, I felt like you saw the reality, which was they didn't really trust anybody outside of Brandon Coleman and Andrew Coker. And they were moving those guys around because they were having issues at tackle. They're having issues at guard. And so it was a mess up front. And it never really it got better as the year went on, but it never got as solid as you would want it to be for this offense to function properly. So that's a big question. And then number 3, turning over the defense, I just simply want to know who the leaders on this defense are. And I'm guessing Nnamdi Obaizar is one of them. He's going to be there at media days. So I'm excited to hear his perspective. But there's a number of guys. Nnamdi's one of them. Abe Kamara, that I think are going to benefit from this change on defense. Now, hopefully everybody does. But from an aggressiveness standpoint and just the flexibility, the position flex, like, all right, let's use these athletes to get sideline to sideline, and let's use them at different levels of the defense to confuse opposing offenses and create turnovers and create havoc and make big-time plays. So who are the players that are standing out to the defensive coaching staff and to Sonny Dykes that are really going to thrive with this new defense? Jonathan Bax, who entered the transfer portal and then decided, you know what, I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to make something happen. Marcel Brooks, which is a name we've been hearing for years now because he's such a great athlete and there's so much potential there. But TCU just hasn't been able to find a good fit for him and a good way to move forward with him, either on offense or defense, because they had that weird season where they tried to use him at wide receiver. But he was a situational edge rusher during spring camp, and he made some waves. He made some plays. So is this finally, a way for him to break out and make things happen? All those questions coming forward now as we get closer to actual games being played. But who are the players that are going to benefit the most from this change on defense? And what is the identity of an Andy Avalos defense going to look like once they hit the field on Saturdays? Those are the three questions that I'm hoping get asked and get answered during Big 12 Media Days, again, at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. And Sonny's press conference is at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So if you want to check that out, go for it. I'll have, some thoughts on what he says during tomorrow's show, and we'll get more into where this team is headed and where they're going. Picked to finish 10th in the conference, didn't have a single player on the All Big 12 team. Not a lot of expectations for this TCU group, which in previous history, that's where the Frogs have really thrived, when people have underestimated them and not paid a ton of attention to them. So hopefully that's the case again, and they can use this as motivation and play at a high level this upcoming season. When we come back, TCU landed a commit at the running back position for 2025. We'll talk about that and more next. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. Gametime app. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions, as always, do apply. But Gametime is the best place to go if you're looking for tickets to a sporting event. Is it a concert, a comedy show, whatever the case is, use the Gametime app today. A couple features that I really love about it. There's no hidden fees. I mean, there's fees like everywhere else, but they tell you exactly what it's going to be up front, which is fantastic. Love that about the app, the transparency there. And then also you get a picture of the view from your seat. So you see exactly what the view from your seat's going to be. When you click on the preview there, you know what to expect. Gametime app. Download the Gametime app today, and you can use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Gametime, the best place to purchase tickets. Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So some exciting news on the recruiting front. Of course, on Friday's show, I had to break the unfortunate news that Ty Hawkins would be moving on from TCU. He decommitted from the Frogs, committed to SMU. And so TCU's figuring that out. But in the midst of all that happening, they also landed a commitment from a 2025 running back, John Denman from Palestine, Texas, home of Adrian Peterson, who turned out to be a pretty good running back himself. But John has a good offer list: Arizona, Boston College, Oklahoma State, Houston, Michigan State, and many others. And I love his tape. As soon as you turn it on, the first thing that jumped out to me, this is a physical running back. And at Palestine, they use him in a lot of ways. He actually played defense as well. So he was a linebacker, also plays running back, and they would direct snap it to him a lot. So he was kind of like a quasi quarterback as well. They just snap it straight to him. He's taking the ball and he's getting downhill. And immediately you see that ability to run downhill, take contact on, and then just keep churning those legs. And I love that aspect of it because Amani Bailey was good after contact last year. Like, he did a good job of taking on contact, not going down when he got hit. But, with Kendre Miller, TCU really had an attitude in their run game because he would just run people over. He had that stiff arm that he had working well, and he hardly ever went down when he got hit, especially between the tackles, trying to get positive yardage. And Max Duggan had that ability as well. And I just feel like it added a different dimension, a different attitude, and it energized the team. So I'm really excited about John Denman and just the fact that he gets after it in that way, that he can run through tackles, punish guys that are trying to bring him down to the ground. And I mean, in the high school ranks, like they use him in a ton of different ways. They get the ball in his hands. He was also pretty effective catching the ball in the backfield, getting upfield, making moves, making things happen. As far as measurables go, 5'10", 193 pounds. Gabe Brooks from 247 said he's a two-way player who can honestly play ball at running back or at linebacker at the power 4 level. They projected him as running back for long-term potential. He looks like a running back on tape, instinctive runner with fairly quick feet and good redirection in his first move, and does a good job, in the pass protection game when that's required. A physical runner with above average contact balance, displays downhill acceleration with top end speed. So, I mean, he's got it. Like he can pop out of a pile and take it to the house with that speed. He can run over people. He showed the ability take the football, get to the edge, get to the sideline, and outrun people as well. So everything you would want in a running back, it appears that he has. And I would think this is the only running back they take in the 2025 class. I don't know that for sure. They took 2 last year with Nate Palmer and Jeremy Payne. And those guys will be on campus here shortly and will be making plays this upcoming season. They have Trent Battle on the roster. They have Connor Cook, obviously. They have Cam Cook. They have Trey Sanders for now. So they've got a lot of guys at that spot at the moment. There's not a huge need. No, you could lose a few of those players this offseason, but I would think that's the one running back they're going to take in this class. So John Denman, 3-star running back from Palestine, coming over to the Frogs for 2025 class. Really good player, and I just like when I watch him on tape, that physical running style that he has and his ability to make guys miss and make things happen. As far as what they're going to do at QB now that Ty Hawkins has decided he's going to move on, I don't have a great answer for that. I wonder, the issue with quarterback recruiting and now in the year of our Lord 2025 is a lot of these guys make their choice early because they want to know, they want to know where they're going. And in most cases, schools are only taking one quarterback per class now because of the transfer portal and all the complications that brings with the QB position. So part of me wonders if they're going to go after somebody, it's most likely somebody that's already committed. And they're just going to have to, try to sway them to make the move over here. But in some ways, I wonder if they just sort of stay put and see how things play out and then maybe go after a quarterback in the portal. Because people have mentioned this, like, you're going to have a crowded quarterback room. And, I mean, you want that embarrassment of riches, but if you end up with Hoover, Haas, and Ty Hawkins, that's 3 guys that expect to start. And so you can let them battle it out. But as much as I think ultimately this was an NIL decision, I feel like Ty Hawkins is getting paid significantly more by SMU to come play there. And I don't know if he gave TCU the opportunity to match that. And they said, you know what, we think we're going to let you go on this one. Or if it was just like, this is just too good of an offer to pass up. And he didn't really give TCU the opportunity to counter. But I think that's what was driving this. I do feel like there is also, though, the factor that SMU quarterback room is less crowded. And I'm not saying, like, I heard people, or I saw people this weekend, like, using the, he's just scared of competition excuse, which, man, I mean, that sounds like sour grapes to me. I get what you're trying to communicate, but, like, yeah, that just sounds like a school that lost a commit that they're excited about. But there is a clear path to playing time there. And he said that, publicly. So I think ultimately it was a money decision, but I do feel like there's something to be said about, he can play, in theory, he's going to get a chance to play faster at SMU and he won't have to sit behind other QBs for as long. So maybe that had something to do with it as well. But we'll see how TCU kind of regroups and where they go moving forward with the 2025 Classic quarterback. When we come back, we'll get some of your reaction and wrap things up. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. So you can always chime in on the YouTube comments or tweet at me at SimcockSteven. A lot of you had thoughts about Ty Hawkins redoing his commitment and flipping over to SMU. Doug said, don't get too high or too low, keep swinging. Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to approach it. Like, you can't, and I know the coaching staff knows this, but you can't get too caught up in each commitment. I mean, I'm going to cover it and do shows on it because that's part of the gig, but, you know, you don't get over your skis excited, and you can't get too low either. You just kind of have to keep the blinders on, to use a coaching cliche, and get after it. So now they got to regroup and find somebody else who's going to fit that mold as Ty Hawkins leaves for SMU. Richard Berry says this is something that's going to continue to happen as long as there are high-level commits on paper. Hopefully this will be a standalone situation and the money of SMU doesn't flare up to snag the rest of the class. Yeah, and when you say on paper, I assume you mean that in the NIL era, you would like to see guys, if they commit, to go ahead and sign paperwork and actually have a commitment. And I mean, I would like to see that too. I think that's something that if and when the major conference power brokers decide, you know what, we don't need the NCAA anymore, we're going to break away, we're going to go do our own thing. That's something with, you know, collective bargaining and with communicating with players and coaches, they could probably institute, but that's not where we are now. And, you know, I mean, loyalty obviously goes both ways. Teams can cut guys just about whenever they want, or they can say to someone who's committed to university, you know what, we found somebody else, or, hey, sorry, we don't think this is a fit anymore. And players have that same opportunity, but it does make for a tough deal for the fans because you get attached to somebody, and that's just how it is. Jacob Langford says, no, God, please no, in his best Michael Scott impression, but he went on to say Haas is our guy. I mean, Haas was committed through that whole process, and he had a lot of people after him, obviously, as a big-name QB. You know, it always helps when you have roots here, and with his parents being TCU alums, TCU athletes, I'm sure that made a huge difference. But, yeah, you know, Ty decided to go a different direction. Dylan Miller said, SMU is glad they can pay players big money without getting in trouble. We will see how well they retain their players. I mean, you know, you make a joke, and it's totally warranted, but they have done a good job, as much as I hate to say it, and it makes sense, but understanding this new era of college football. And, you know, they got the death penalty for it years ago, as you kind of laid out there, but now it's legal, and they're enjoying having that ability to use their resources to try to entice guys to come play for them. So, you know, TCU can do that too, and I hope they can play that game. I also talked about the Frogs being picked 10th in the Big 12. Big Easy says, I don't see 9 teams better than TCU. I'd say no worse than 5th, but he also mentioned that he's a homer. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it could be a rebuilding years in some way, but I said this in the last episode. I was like, listen, if this team ends up in 10th place, then something has gone wrong, and we got some serious questions about Sonny Dykes. I just feel like that's the reality of it. Now, it's going to be a parity-driven league, but, man, I just – there's some tough games on the schedule. I'm not ready to call them Big 12 championship contenders right now, but I feel like they're better than 10th place. And if they're not, then we got some real issues moving forward for this coaching staff and the program and kind of where they're going in general. But we'll hear more about where they're at and what the future might hold at media days over the next few days. We'll have plenty of coverage of that. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team. We do it here every day.